My guest this month is tech entrepreneur Armin Samii, and we'll get on to the gig work stuff in a moment. But first, to understand Armin, you need to understand his long-standing interest in product design. He taught himself computer coding when he was a kid.
I remember once I was going to a party with my family, and I decided I wanted to write a Sudoku solver. And it was a 2.5 hour car drive, and I was like, I can do it in 2.5 hours. I didn't. And at the party, all I could think about was all the bugs in my code and what I was going to do on the drive home. And I couldn't have any fun at the party. And so eventually I snuck into my dad's car, plugged in my laptop, and started coding, in the corner somewhere where nobody would bother me.
What does programming a website on a laptop in the back of your dad's car look like in 2005? I mean, you're not connected to the internet, I presume.
It was a Java application, so it was like an old, desktop app, not a web, nothing on the web. You can't search Google for any help, right? Back then, we didn't have tethering or anything. It's a much bigger struggle when you don't have access to the internet, for sure. Because all of these questions you have about how to code and what mistakes are coming up and what that error message means, you're kind of on your own for. But I think that's kind of fun, too.
Eventually, Armin's interests led to a bachelor's degree in computer science, then a job at Adobe working on apps for Photoshop, and then to the bold world of startups.
So first I spent like 4 years working in the fashion industry at a startup that would do like virtual try-on. So you would upload your body type to the computer, and then it would use what's called physically based simulation to simulate how clothing would fall and drape over your body. So you could see not only what size you should get, but is that going to look good on my body type? Mm-hmm. And then from there, I moved on to work for self-driving cars, which is a total left turn, if you will.
That's very California.
I moved to Pittsburgh for the self-driving cars. So there are quite a few in California, but at the time, Pittsburgh was really the hub of self-driving cars. So that's a city in Pennsylvania.
I mean, that really is the vanguard. That's like working on something where everyone around you is telling you this is the next big thing and it's going to happen imminently. But in the real world, there are blocks. Yes,
I think I drank the Kool-Aid too much, if you will. I really bought into the imagine how safe the world will be if we had self-driving cars everywhere. Self-driving cars, of course, are safer than human drivers. They have a different set of problems. The big one is just space, right? If you are in a self-driving car as an individual, the space you're taking up is something like 30 times your body size. Mm-hmm. And cities just cannot support that many vehicles, right? We really need denser transit, buses, bike lanes.
And in terms of coding, what kind of thing were you doing?
I really love products. And so I was building the interface between the computer and the human and trying to understand what the car sees, what the car is going to do next, and communicate all of that to the drivers. Gigabytes of data into a very intelligible display so that in a glance, somebody sitting in the passenger seat knows exactly what the car's thinking and what the car's going to do. Mm. And I found that pretty exciting because it's really not about the car at all. It's about how do you make this data understandable to a human?
Yes.
And I found that problem really fun.
Were you unusual in that company in thinking about that human interaction as a paramount concern? I imagine there's a lot of people who are very interested in how the technology works and just don't think what it's like in actual everyday application.
Yes, very much. Let's say hypothetically a driver ran a stop sign or the car ran a stop sign, and a higher up in the company said, well, every time they approach a stop sign, you should have an alert on the laptop saying stop sign approaching. Mm-hmm. And there's something called alarm fatigue. If an alarm is going off, if something's being said to you every block all the time, you tune it out. And this is a very basic HCI principle. But the higher up, I wasn't able to convince him. He mandated that I implement this. And within hours, all the drivers boycotted. They said, we are not driving with that alarm beeping every block. And they stopped driving. They said, until you fix it, like they came back early for lunch and they said, we're not driving after lunch unless it's fixed. And that's the type of thing that the company just wasn't caring about how real humans act in these scenarios.
I don't know much about Pittsburgh as a city. How commutable is it? I mean, is car the best way to get around it?
Yes and no. We do have some bike infrastructure. It's getting better. We have an okay bus system, but that's about it. I haven't had a car in over 10 years now. And I've lost friends over it. I mean, I've had friends move to the suburbs. I biked to their house once, nearly got hit and said, this friendship is not worth my life. I cannot bike on the road to your house, so I can't come visit. You have a small child, so you can't come visit me easily. It's not good enough, but still there's a lot of people who cannot or do not drive in the city.
Something quite subversive about working for a self-driving car company and then cycling there.
I mean, you can see why I didn't last long at the company. There's a parking garage under the company, and it was by seniority who could fit in the parking garage, and everybody else had to park a block away. And the bike racks were in the parking garage. And so I was...
So you got to share an elevator with the boss.
Yeah, exactly. I got a better parking spot than any CEO or any high-level person, because right outside the doors to the elevator was the bike parking. And actually, the week I quit that job at the self-driving car company, I walked into a bike shop and I spotted this bright orange bike with 3 multicolored stripes on it. It was a gravel bike, which in Pittsburgh, there's a trail that you can bike from here to DC. But it requires a bike with kind of thicker tires than my road bike had. It was beautiful. It was the colors I wanted. It was the style I wanted. And it was about $1,000, which was the price
I was
point.
waiting. I was waiting for that amount.
Yeah.
I could tell that was coming.
More expensive than any bike I've ever purchased.
So you've got $1,000 bike and no job.
Yeah.
And so you came up with the idea of gig work.
Yeah, I figured I really want to get some miles on this bike. So I'm biking around town. And I was like, why just bike randomly? I feel like I could explore my city better, make a little bit of money if I just did some Uber Eats delivery.
What was your familiarity with Uber Eats at that time? Had you used it as a customer?
Not much. I'm very frugal. I mean, at the time, the fees weren't that bad. They've increased since. But still, the idea of paying, an extra $10 when I could walk 10 minutes. But I knew it was a pandemic. It was early days of the pandemic. And so people weren't going to restaurants. And so gig workers were really, they were on TV all the time. Like, look at this hero. He delivered a pizza and that kind of language. I was like, I
actually, as well,
hero.
the roads are safer, aren't they? If there's fewer cars around in the city, then actually that's a good time to be cycling. No?
No, it's actually, so it would seem so. But if you look at the data, actually all around the world during the pandemic, road deaths skyrocketed, especially for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so it was confusing at first, but I think what people have come to realize is if there's fewer cars on the road, that means there's no traffic. If there's no traffic, you can speed. And so the average speed of cars was increasing. People were driving much faster without traffic. And so it became much more dangerous to be out of a vehicle. Luckily, I didn't know that at the time. So I thought it was safer, just like you did now.
I mean, this background of data, which you're evidencing, and your, career in computer engineering by this point makes you an unusual candidate for Uber Eats, I would imagine. What was the sign-up process like?
It was odd because I can understand when AI is working behind the scenes. And I remember the first hitch I hit was early days of the pandemic. I think many people were doing what I was doing, which is like, I wonder what I look like with a beard. I don't want to try this in public, but let me try growing out my beard to see what the world is like. I had long hair, big beard. And Uber Eats needed a photo and it could not recognize my face. It couldn't see my features through the beard. And so it kept saying like, invalid photo, you must upload a different photo. I tried different angles. I tried different lighting. Like it wouldn't get my face. And eventually, being a computer engineer, I was like, well, probably it needs to find a mouth and it's not seeing a mouth because of my beard. And so I was like, what if I just open my mouth really wide? I think I could trick the algorithm. And that's the photo that worked, is just me like screaming into the thing. And then, of course, it shows that photo to everybody you're delivering to. So
yes,
there's
your delivery is on the way. This man shouting into the void.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember your first day on the job?
Yeah, I remember being confused because I was waiting at home for the app to ding. And after 15 minutes, I still it didn't say you need to pick anything up. I was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, what's going on? And I was like, well, maybe if I just go stand by a restaurant, that restaurant will ding. Like, are there tricks like this? And I don't know if it was or wasn't, but it was just like a very frustrating first 15 minutes. Like I got excited. I got my helmet on. I was going to bike around and then I was just standing at home. Like, what do I do? And then I decided to bike down to the core and then got my first ping. And then from there, it was kind of overwhelming. I mean, I would get home and just feel like I got an incredible workout. I mean, I was sore, I was tired. Like, it was just ding after ding after ding. Like, I finished one delivery and immediately had like another one lined up, and I would be biking there. And I knew speed was of the essence because you go 10% faster, you make 10% more money. And so I found that whole thing really exciting, actually. It was this rush of bouncing around and getting in the room with other drivers who are like complaining, oh, I had to park so far away. There's no parking by this restaurant. And I just leave my bike at the front door and walk right in. So a little bit of cockiness, I suppose, walking into those rooms. After the first day or two, I realized biking to the wealthiest areas of Pittsburgh always gets you incredible tips and pretty easy trips. And so I would just immediately go to the wealthy areas, and they would leave like 100% tips. Like, it'd be $2 from Uber and like $7 as a tip. I liked it in terms of my pocketbook, but I also understand the societal implications that, well, now there's all these gig workers flocking to the wealthy neighborhoods. Now the wealthy neighborhoods are getting this great service. Now the less wealthy neighborhoods, like, why would they tip? They had to wait 3 times as long because there weren't as many drivers.
And also, I mean, again, it's a generalization, but I imagine often in the less wealthy neighborhoods, you're delivering a family meal. And in the more expensive neighborhoods, you're delivering a coffee that they could have made at home if they'd really wanted to.
That's often, and on a bike, that weight really matters. And often at the less wealthy neighborhoods, they'd be ordering from fast food places. They make you go through a drive-through pretty frequently. And a drive-through on a bike is very stressful. I mean, you're sitting out there doing nothing. You're surrounded by cars. You're hoping that everyone can see you. It just feels kind of silly to be biking through a drive-through and waiting for 20 minutes. Whereas, again, the wealthier neighborhoods, like, yeah, you walk in, there's a little area for food. The nicer restaurants have a table for delivery with little signs of the names. So it's a nicer experience than picking up fast food.
Were there jobs that you learned to always cancel?
There was this one McDonald's that I don't understand what was happening. But I showed up to the address and it was a parking lot. And then I found a McDonald's like a block away from it. So I biked up to that McDonald's and I was like, I have an Uber Eats delivery, but the address is a block away. Is this actually you guys? And she looked at it. She's like, that's not us. Like, we don't have that delivery.
Okay.
So I was like, well, that's strange. So I called Uber to say, like, hey, this McDonald's doesn't exist. Like, take it off your network and hopefully like pay me $1 or $2 for my time. I ended up on hold for like 30 or 40 minutes. And at the end of it, they said, well, we can't just take off a McDonald's. Like, we don't have that power, but we can give you a $2, apology. And it's like, okay, I would get that McDonald's over and over the next, however many days I was doing Uber Eats. And I just knew to always cancel it. And I expect that everybody else was also canceling it because somehow they figured out, oh, that's the non-existent McDonald's.
Oh, that's hard for everybody, isn't it? I mean, no one wants
Right.
that. McDonald's don't want that. The customers don't want that. And the drivers don't want that. And as you're saying, I suppose it's the incentive, isn't it, for Uber is not there to call McDonald's. That's all they need to do. A manager needs to see your request and call McDonald's themselves, but they wouldn't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it seems like an easy solution, but their customer support representatives have zero power to do anything other than the 6 buttons or whatever on their screen.
Yeah.
Right?
And presumably their customer support center wasn't in Pennsylvania either. It was probably in India or something. You're in Pennsylvania. You're both interacting with a computer network with limited data.
I've interacted with them over email as well. And there I can really see that they've got a few buttons. They've got stock responses. And like, it seems like they're empowered to just hit a button and that's it, and try to go through as many cases as quickly as possible. So on email, they're definitely not listening to what you say. On the phone, they're barely listening. They're basically saying, which of the few buttons that I have accessible do I hit? And then try to hang up as fast as possible.
What was the longest journey that you had to do?
So the longest, it was the end of a day and I was biking home. I was out of water and it was like 2 p.m. and it was getting really hot. Like, it was getting in the 90s. And so I was like, I'm just going to get home. But then I got one last ping for $7 And it said I think it was like a 4 or 6 minute drive. And I was like, well, that can't be more than a 15-minute ride. And it looks kind of on my way. It's on the other side of the river, but the pickup point is right next to me. And the drop-off point looks like it's just across the river. So I'll do it. So I accepted that. And when I get to the restaurant, I get another ping. And what they do is they can stack orders. So they can say, pick up 2 things from this restaurant and deliver it to 2 different places, to 2 different people. Do you want to accept the addition? And again, I couldn't really tell on the map what was going on, but I was like, I think it was another $8. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll accept that too. And so I wait in the restaurant for some time, and then I get the order, and you can't actually see the address until you've clicked pick up order.
At all?
So, at all, yeah. I mean, maybe you see it on the map, but I think the map goes away, and like you don't have the exact address. Maybe that's for security or privacy, right? They don't want to give away people's addresses unless they're actually delivering. Whatever the reason, I'm waiting in the restaurant, and then I click accept, and then plug in the address into Google Maps, and it tells me it's like a 45-minute bike ride to the first location. And that bike ride is up a huge hill. Like Google Maps will show you the elevation, which I didn't notice before. I know now that side of the river has a huge hill. At the time, I wasn't familiar. I call Uber support to say I can't do this. And after like 5 minutes on hold, I realized like, well, I should just start biking there because I don't know how long I'm going to be on hold. I know that in the past it's been 30 minutes and I can't just sit here with 30 minutes with these 2 people's food. So I start biking up the hill, and I'm on hold for the entire 45-minute bike ride up this hill. It's hot. I'm out of water. I am so unhappy.
And you know that you're just getting $7 at the end of it. There's no negotiation on that.
You know, a few minutes before I reach the house, Uber support actually picks up, and I explain the situation. And at that point, I'm like, I'm almost here. Can you just call the person and tell her, sorry, I'm late? So I get there, and she is blown away. She's like, I cannot believe Uber sent a bike up that hill. It's like, I can't either. I don't know what was going on. And then, of course, I have to bike down the hill and then up a different hill, less bad hill, to drop off the second delivery. That second guy was angry. I mean, the first woman was understanding and kind of like, oh, you came up the hill. Thank you so much. The second guy just like grabbed the food. It was like an hour late at that point.
Yes.
So I thought at the time that the issue was just that they gave me driving directions and not biking directions. Because I looked on a map and I saw that, oh, there was a freeway I could have taken and I could have gotten there much sooner via the freeway. So actually, when I get home, I start emailing Uber support and saying like, hey, can you please add biking directions? Because like it was not 6 minutes on bike. It was like 50. And then they're giving me back nonsense answers. So eventually I go to like Google to show the screenshots. And I realize on Google, it's like a 20-minute drive. I was like, well, that's not the number I was shown. And so I look at it, and Uber says it was a 1-mile ride. And I plug it into Google, and it says it was a 4-mile drive.
Because you have to get on the freeway, and it takes longer in mileage than it would do as the crow flies.
But I did that measurement too, and it's like 2 miles as the crow flies. And so in all senses, this number that it gave me, I think it was 1.1 miles, that number just had no relation to reality. It was not as a crow flies. It was not driving distance. Obviously, you can't beat the crow. So then I started amending my conversations with Uber, saying like, this is more serious. Like this 6-minute, 1.1 mile delivery you sent me, like those numbers are just wrong. This is a bug. Like you've got a bug in your software. I assumed it was a bug specific to bicycling because I was like, there's so few bicyclists who deliver on Uber, especially in Pittsburgh. I know bugs aren't like specific to one area, but I was like, well, it can't be so widespread that it's affecting every driver because there would be uproar, right? If drivers were dealing with this all the time, we would have heard about it.
And what response back did you get?
It was a lesson in absurdism. The responses I got ranged from, have you tried restarting your phone? Maybe get off Wi-Fi and use your 5G instead. Occasionally they would take me like deep in like the network settings and they're like, reset your network settings, like delete all Wi-Fi. It was just a bizarre set of solutions that it's clear again, like some algorithm popped up a list of possible solutions, and they were just like randomly clicking these buttons. I think I sent something like 14 messages back and forth and got 14 variations of try restarting your phone or try restarting the app or delete and reinstall the app. And it's
But the assumption is the app can't be wrong. Something you're doing is wrong.
Exactly. And it's like, this is showing up on the app, on the website, on my statement, which is a PDF. Like, I can print that out and show you the bug still exists on a piece of paper. Like, this is not a issue on the user end. This is an issue in how Uber calculated how to get me from here to there.
And the important thing is not about correcting their software per se. It's also to do with your remuneration, isn't it? If that's wrong, you're earning not enough money.
Right. And so what I was asking for was just struggling for the, I don't know how much I thought they owed me, but like, let's say it was $4. I was just fighting for that $4 back, right? I was like, you had a bug in this thing. You owe me $4. Please pay me the $4.
But you accepted the job at $7.
I accepted it at $7.
But only because you didn't know that it was actually an $11 job.
I mean, I wouldn't have taken, if I knew how painful it would be, I would not have done it for 11 either.
Yeah.
Right. But for a driver, I think in a car, it would be an 11-minute job. Right. So there's a few issues. One, it should understand hills and not send bikes up huge hills. It should have the distance calculated for bikes. But that I felt was too much to ask for the company. Right. All I was asking was like, okay, I understand that you're never going to make this nice and easy for people on bikes. At least pay me the correct amount for what I would have done if I were a driver. Right. The number's wrong. You paid me for 1 mile. It was actually 4 miles. You got to pay me for the 4 miles. No response after 14 emails. Eventually I spent 3 hours, I think, on the phone. I mean, I was committed. I recorded about an hour of those phone calls. And finally, I found somebody after enough escalation. She sent me, I don't know if it was I think it was like $3.50. I was like, all right. And at first I felt satisfied. I was like, I got my $3.50 back. I can sleep easy. And I was like, well, bugs don't happen one-off. I wonder if I can look through my statement and find other times that this may have happened. But I know Uber hides the addresses from you, right? You can't just see the start and end address. But I remember
even when you've delivered there, you can't see it anymore.
Yeah, after you've finished the delivery, it goes away.
Which I suppose that does kind of make sense for privacy. You don't want people harassing people, but then
exactly.
You can't prove where you've been.
Yeah, it just shows a little map and like the distance, but like it doesn't actually show you the start and end address. Again, I agree with that for privacy, right? I don't want them having my address forever on their statement. But I remember seeing an image of each ride of a map showing the path from the start to the end. And I know how those images are generated. And I know that in general, to have one of those images, you have a URL that uses like a tool like Google Maps or Mapbox or something. And in the code of that URL, it often has the GPS coordinates of what you're drawing on the map. Mm-hmm. And so I went to bed that night thinking, I wonder if those GPS coordinates will let me actually enter those values into Google Maps and check all of my trips and see if this happened for other ones, not just the one I happened to save the address for manually. So the next day I woke up early, like 7 a.m., which for me is early. And I was like really excited to get started. I had my coffee at my computer, which I never do. I'm a very strict, right-clicked and saw the HTML, the code, and I plugged in some trips into Google Maps to see if it happened other times for me. And sure enough, it had. They say like it's a 2-mile trip. I would plug the trip into Google Maps and Google Maps would say that's actually a 3-mile trip. Or it'd be like a 1-mile trip, but it was actually 1.8 miles. And so I saw this happening over and over throughout my statement.
And you're searching at this point for the driving directions on Google Maps.
Yes. Biking directions, of course, are longer, but giving Uber the most benefit of the doubt, it's the driving directions. And I'm not even looking at the shortest time. I'm looking at the shortest distance, which is often different. But just to give Uber the most benefit of the doubt, like what is the least distance you can travel via car between that location and that location? And even that was not correct on like quite a few of my trips, like 20 or 30% of my trips. It was off by like at least a quarter of a mile.
I mean, I suppose a quarter of a mile in a car at the kind of rates they're paying is probably only, 40 cents difference, isn't it?
Right. So most of my trips didn't matter, but you add that up over time and you see the few that were like miles off. And it's like, well, what are they using to calculate this? Like, clearly it's not correct.
So potentially you're thinking there are Uber Eats drivers who do this as a job full time who are getting underpaid by $10, $20, $30 a day.
Yeah, I mean, my gut is closer to like the $10 a day, but if they're really doing it for a full-time job, then yeah, the 20 or 30. But it's really like a few dollars or less per trip that I expect that people are getting underpaid, right? I saw it was on the order of like 10 to 20% per trip, and then like some were much more, but on average like 10 or 20%, which means they're getting paid 10 or 20% less than they should be. And a 20% raise is a 20% raise, right? Regardless of the mileage, like that's significant.
Still to come, Armin uses his computer coding background to invent a solution for gig workers around the world. And it's not long before he hears from Uber's lawyers. That's when the modern man returns, after this. Back to my conversation with Armin Samii now. And at this point in the story, he's just worked out that his journey lengths as an Uber Eats delivery cyclist have been underestimated by Uber's app. And he thinks the errors he's identified could affect many more gig workers.
So I decided to write a Chrome extension, a little app that would automatically parse my statement, look at all of these trips and look at the start and end destination. It would automatically plug those into a Google Maps search that was just in code, and then figure out the shortest distance, and then compare that to what Uber paid you for. And at the end, you'd have a chart of here's what Uber paid you for, and here's how long you actually traveled for. And if there was a misalignment, it would show you here's how much you were underpaid. You were underpaid by 3 miles or 4 miles or half a mile. And it would give you this list of trips that you could click, and then it would give you a little script where you could call Uber and say what I did, which is this trip, I was underpaid by this much. The thing is actually this much. And it would give you the steps I went through, which is like, first thing you do, ask for a manager. Second thing you do, ask if they can plug it into Google Maps. Then ask them to plug in the start and end address. And then you'll see that you're underpaid, and then try to get your money back.
You're smiling now as you tell this story.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were being a bit devious at the time?
I love being devious, though. I love being petty. I mean, I was working from like 7 a.m. to like 8 p.m. that night, just like working straight. I was just so excited to like get this thing polished. I'd never written a Chrome extension, so I made a little like video snippet of it, like a little branding video of what happened. I made a little logo, which looks like it was made in MS Paint.
And what was the name of the Chrome extension?
I called it Uber Cheats.
When did that occur to you? Did you have the name before you started?
I think I had the name before I started. I was like, what can I name this? And it just clicked. Like I think like between 7 and 8 a.m., like as I was starting, the name came to me, and I was like, that's good. I thought maybe I'd find another Uber driver or two. But I posted it on HackerRank, and that's like a little tech website where people can upvote things like Reddit. And in that time, I heard from quite a few drivers using it.
How many?
In those early days, I think it was in the dozens of drivers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, had drivers from all over the world. I mean, people in Thailand and Mexico and Brazil, people emailing me saying, hey, it doesn't work in my language. I have to like change my language to English before it works. Like, can you fix that? And yeah, it was pretty exciting seeing like people actually care and people being upset, right? Saying like, oh, these are my wages that Uber was taking.
So you'd quit, had you, as an Uber cyclist at this point?
I had only done it for a few days, but after that, I didn't feel right getting back and doing another Uber delivery.
How many people downloaded the extension?
I want to say around 1,000, maybe 2,000 in the end. But that's still like quite a few drivers and like a lot of statements that were getting uploaded to it. One thing that happened is after the initial wave died down, I got a letter from Uber's lawyers and from Google saying you're infringing on our trademark.
Right.
You've got to take this down. Mm-hmm. It was called Uber Cheats. And so I did some research on US trademark law and realized that's not how trademarks work. Trademarks are you're infringing on someone's trademark if somebody could reasonably believe that you are the other company. I mean, don't quote me. I'm not a lawyer. But nobody would reasonably believe that Uber put out a product called Uber Cheats that checks your stolen wages. And so I fought back. I said that's not how trademark law works. I sent a message to Uber's lawyers. I sent a message to Google. So it came back up after a day or two. And then I wrote this up in a press release and sent it out saying, here's what Uber did, but don't worry, Uber Cheats is back. We have won the trademark battle, which makes it sound a little more grand than sending an email. But that's when it really took off. That's when the story really became.
Oh, wow. So Streisand effect, they tried to clamp you down, made it worse.
Exactly. They thought if we wait a few weeks and then, nobody will know, but absolutely Streisand effect. So after that, it got picked up in Wired and a bunch of much larger outlets. I assume the Uber lawyers regretted doing that.
Did you make any money out of it?
No. And in fact, I actually felt weird taking any tips from the Uber customers, just because as a tech worker, I know that my salary is not what most Uber drivers are getting. So I kept all the wages from Uber, but I donated all of the tips because something about it felt wrong.
I mean, to a lot of those drivers, I imagine you're a kind of union rep type figure, right? You're doing this thing. They probably thought, even if you weren't doing it for money, that maybe you'd do a class action lawsuit together, or maybe you'd go and represent them in Parliament or whatever.
Yeah, I contacted some lawyers. I sent them all the data I had. Said I think there's room for a class action, and they called back and said yeah, we want to do a class action. But I kind of jumped the gun on that one. Doing a class action lawsuit and being the class representative is apparently a lot of work. I mean, it's hours of depositions and travel and of course burning bridges with Uber, which at the time was, if I ever wanted to go back into the self-driving car industry, Uber was a big player. I mean, I didn't think I could ever get a job at Uber after this anyway, but
sure. No, but that's interesting. You feel like your card might be marked in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and I don't mind if they were marked and people saw this and didn't want to hire me because of it. I wanted to start my own company, and all this time spent suing Uber, didn't feel like I could do that and start my own company. And without a class representative, the class action fell apart.
So, I mean, you met other people then, did you? I mean, virtually at least, who had similar stories to yours in different companies?
Yeah, I mean, this actually started to feel kind of minor, given the scale of what was happening in other cities and other apps. And one example that's kind of recent in New York City is they passed, I think, a wage floor. So if you're working full time for gig work, you need to be paid a certain amount. And so what the gig apps do now is they will kick you off saying you are not working right now because there are not enough jobs. And so you just have to sit for 45 minutes waiting to be re-enabled on the app. You're not going to go home, right? You're not going to give up your day of wages. You just have to wait out the clock. But because you weren't working for that 45 minutes, they can now avoid this wage floor rule. So things like that are becoming common, and it's really nefarious how these companies are really trying to keep gig workers from being classified as employees, even when they're working, 9 to 5, 40-hour weeks. I got an email as recently as a year ago that said, hey, it's still happening. Can you re-enable your extension? I can't find it anywhere.
Oh, you took it down?
Yeah, it was so much work to maintain because every time Uber updates their code even a little bit, I'd have to update the extension. And then I was supporting several different countries because the webpage looks different in different countries. And it got to be so much work to just keep it up. And I kind of felt like it did its job, which was to get attention around it.
Yes. But there is now no way, as far as you know, for Uber Eats drivers to be able to verify how far they've actually traveled, unless presumably they work out their own bit of code on their own bit of software on their own phone, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the extension is open source, and so anybody listening is free to go and grab the Uber Cheats source code and revive it and get it working again.
Do you still use Uber Eats?
Rarely. The fees have increased so much that it's double the price. I will use it if I've had an edible and cannot leave the house and need food delivered straight to me. And so once a month, we treat ourselves to an Uber Eats delivery of our favorite Chinese food.
And do you tip?
I tip, but I don't use the Uber Eats delivery. So I order from a Chinese restaurant that has their own delivery driver.
Right.
And so the same guy comes to our house, and I kind of prefer that, right? We've got a relationship with this one person rather than just a stranger coming.
pick up the phone and talk to them, like in the 90s?
Uber Eats lets you, I almost called it Uber Cheats. Uber Eats lets you order from restaurants that have their own delivery drivers.
Oh, okay. So you've learned how to navigate that in their own menu.
But it's still a useful service, right? I mean, Uber Eats and Uber Delivery.
When it works, as an end user, it's phenomenal. But I guess a lot of people listening to this will be asking themselves, especially after everything you've just said, if it's ethical.
Basically, the issue with rideshare and gig work is that there's no central place for people to fight back against their bosses, right? In a workplace, in a traditional workplace, you're all in the same place together. And if there's unfair practices, you can really fight against those practices. With gig work, you're so decentralized that you can't. And so having these unionization type efforts like Gig Workers United really tries to bring people together in a way that they can have collective action. And I think that, in the early days of the pandemic, you were making good money on it. I've heard now that the wages have been cut more than in half. And for drivers, it's worse because you take into account the maintenance on your car, the gasoline. You're really walking away with often less than minimum wage, sometimes even losing money if, I've heard of people buying new cars to Uber drives. And so they're even losing money every month, hoping that once the car's paid off, then they'll start making money. Mm. Yeah, so I hesitate to say it's unethical to use it because so many people use it, and I understand that phrase has a lot of implications. But I do wonder if it is not inherently unfair to the gig workers. And I think we're seeing fewer and fewer long-term gig workers. I think a lot of people do it for a little while, realize it's not a sustainable life, and then churn out. And so we've built up all of these safeguards so that employees are paid well, are treated fairly. If you work in a factory and you're injured, your wages are paid for if it's, caused by the job place. We had to fight through the labor movement in the United States for all of those. And the gig work, like the only innovation, I think, is figuring out a way to skirt those regulations. Once those regulations are back in place, people are going to go back to, okay, your pizza doesn't get delivered by a gig worker, it gets delivered by an employee of that pizza place. I think we're going to see more of that as these regulations come, if they come.
Armin Samii. Well, he did set up his own company. It's called Dashcam Bike. It's an image-stabilizing smartphone app that helps cyclists find safety hazards and report them to their city to help activists advocate for safer streets. You can find out about that project at dashcam.bike. We reached out to Uber Eats for a comment on today's interview, and they've sent us this statement.
More drivers and couriers are choosing to earn on Uber than ever before, and we know that the vast majority are satisfied with their experience. The Uber app reviews real-time information to provide the best price to appeal to the drivers or couriers in the area, helping to minimize waiting times for customers and maximize earnings. Our matching tools follow a process that balances a number of different factors, such as time and distance, to provide the best possible experience for everyone using the app.
My thanks to the journalist Madhumita Murgia as well for inspiring this feature. I first found out about Armin's adventures when I was reading her book, Code Dependent. It's one of my favourite books of the last year. It's all about the ordinary people on the coalface affected by developments in AI. I'd really recommend it. That book's Code Dependent. If you've got a story you'd like to share about how the modern world has impacted you, then remember you can reach out via the feedback form on our website, modernmanwith2ns.co.uk. And remember, whilst you're there, you can also donate by clicking Beer Money so we can keep sharing those stories with our audience. Coming up, recyclable sex toys and legal advice for the polyamorous. It can only be the Foxhole. Alex Fox is next, after this.